We tend to think that sweeping human rights abuses arrive with obvious malice and loud declarations, but history shows us something much quieter. Often, the machinery of an atrocity starts as a stack of neatly typed forms, processed by well-meaning administrators looking to solve a problem. Take the state of Indiana in 1907. Lawmakers passed a statute aimed at improving public health. It gave doctors and institutional boards the authority to perform irreversible, compulsory sterilization procedures. At the time, it was viewed simply as a local administrative experiment. The law targeted an ill-defined group of people. It broadly categorized those living in packed state asylums and prisons as unfit. These were highly vulnerable individuals, often with severe medical conditions, placed entirely under state control. To justify these procedures, officials relied on the growing eugenics movement. Promoters of eugenics argued that society could engineer its way out of crime, disease, and poverty through controlled human reproduction. This animated family tree graphic illustrates how they built their case. It maps complicated environmental struggles like poverty directly onto human biology as an inherited genetic trait. By collecting massive amounts of data to create visual plots like this, advocates presented a heavily skewed narrative as cold, hard science. By wrapping the policy in clinical language and standardized approval structures, policymakers disguised the permanent loss of individual reproductive rights as a rational, logical step forward. In 1927, this state-level experiment reached the highest level of government. The United States Supreme Court ruled in a case called Buck v. Bell, officially upholding Virginia's version of the sterilization law. That ruling acted as an absolute legal shield. It removed constitutional friction and told hospital administrators and state officials that their actions were strictly protected under the law. With federal validation, the practice scaled rapidly. By the early 1930s, legislators in over 30 states had adopted their own frameworks, allowing institutions to review cases and approve surgeries. Looking at the data, this line chart shows the total number of sterilization cases climbing sharply toward roughly 60,000 procedures over the following decades. State institutions were severely overcrowded and underfunded. Sterilization was offered to facility directors as a permanent, cost-saving administrative fix. To handle the volume, the process became entirely routine. Boards of doctors and bureaucrats used standardized classifications and paperwork, effectively treating human beings as inventory to be reviewed, processed, and approved. The legal backing insulated the system. Institutional efficiency was prioritized over oversight, leaving the targeted individuals with virtually no way to appeal the decisions made about their bodies. Across the Atlantic, this legal and administrative architecture was closely studied and implemented with severe aggression. By 1933, Germany began to adapt the American framework for its own purposes. They enacted the Law for the Prevention of Hereditarily Diseased Offspring. The program operated in the open. Officials deeply embedded it into the state's legal framework, viewing themselves as executors of standard public health policy. To manage the massive caseload, they constructed specialized infrastructure. They established hundreds of hereditary health courts, deliberately staffing them with cooperating doctors and judges to give the proceedings a veneer of due process. This comparative bar chart shows the output of the two systems side by side. While the United States processed about 60,000 individuals over decades, the hyper-scaled German machinery processed roughly 400,000 people in just a few short years. As this web diagram shows, the criteria for who qualified rapidly expanded. What began as narrow, specific medical classifications branched outward into dozens of vague, highly subjective subcategories based entirely on social behavior. Overt violence alone did not drive these staggering numbers. The machine relied on daily, systemic compliance from clerks, doctors, and legal experts who faithfully executed their administrative duties, completely detached from the personal circumstances of the people they processed. The end of the Second World War in 1945 forced a global review of these policies. The horrific consequences of weaponizing biology were laid bare for the international community. In Germany, the sterilization programs were immediately recognized as integral components of a wider regime of coercion, and they were dismantled. In the United States, the original laws lingered. It took decades of public pressure before they were gradually repealed and acknowledged as ethical failures. Those tens of thousands of data points on the ledgers were real lives. They were permanently altered by a system that placed a higher value on theoretical efficiency than on basic human rights. This architecture relied on three distinct pillars: scientific claims accepted without adequate scrutiny, legal rulings mistakenly treated as moral validation, and administrative efficiency masquerading as social progress. The history of institutional eugenics carries a specific warning for the present. Whenever institutions frame complex human struggles strictly as technical problems, requiring highly efficient solutions, the exact same patterns can emerge. Abusive policies do not require overt malice to scale. They only require the routine paperwork, official stamps, and unchecked momentum of ordinary administrative systems.